Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project founded by Natalie Armstrong Motan. Every Thursday morning, Jean Lawler and I are delighted to host another cutting-edge webinar for mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and everybody who negotiates. As you know, there's no charge for these great programs. We ask you to contribute to a food bank if you like what you see. And one of my favorite parts of the webinar each week is when we announce the running total of just how much our generous audiences have contributed in honor of our great speakers. Jean Lawler, would you please do the honors?
With pleasure. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Well, we've passed that $700,000 mark a couple of years ago, or a couple of weeks ago, not years, sorry. And I can see $1 million in our future, close future. $706,618.17 are the donations to food banks around the world, of which we've been told. So thanks, everyone, for your generosity and of time and treasure. So thank you, and onward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jean. And thank you to all our great speakers, and even more so to all of those who have contributed to food banks in their honor. Today we look east, a fabulous presentation from Aloysius Goh in Singapore, the golden age of mediation and what it has meant for Asia. Here's the description of the presentation you're about to see. Evolution of dispute resolution systems from the eye for an eye primitive stage through the adjudicative stage to a higher evolved consensual stage 3. We will look at historical, behavioral, and economic evidence of the mid-stage struggle for advancement through the eyes of a lifelong practitioner and scholar. And that's Mr. Aloysius Goh. He's the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Sage Mediation. His mediation practice focuses on high-stakes disputes. He has successfully resolved financial and insurance, professional negligence, corporate shareholding, and employment disputes. From his strategic location in Singapore, Aloysius' conflict management education work spans Asia, Europe, and America. Outside of mediation, Aloysius is best described as a spiritual, family-oriented, fitness fanatic. He has spent a year living in the rule of silence in a French Catholic monastery. He owns a Montessori kindergarten, and he has run more than 10 full marathons. Well, this hour is going to be more like a sprint than a marathon. Aloysius Goh, please tell us a little bit about the food bank to which you would like people to contribute if they're in a position to do so, and then on with the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for the introductions. Thank you, Jean, for updating us on how the progress of this entire initiative. And I'm really pleased, really honored that you have allowed me to be part of this effort. I have very much trusted the entire team, Natalie, Jeff, and Jean, and David as well, who has helped to set up this session to decide which is the food bank that a lot of the donations will go to. I think that there are a lot of people in need, and I'm just excited that we're reaching the $1 million mark. To the rest of you who have made time to be with us, please donate, even if you don't find the presentation as impressive as Jeff has very kindly hyped it up to be. I feel under great pressure. I'm like, no, if it can't hit $1 million after this presentation, I'm such a failure, right? But no, but please do donate and add to the cause. I think the world is at a very strange time, and every little bit of grace and generosity helps. I was just remarking with the team before we let everyone in. It's kind of strange, fortuitous timing given the topic and what has just been announced in the US, where Asia is being hit with a lot of tariffs, and then the question is it still the golden age? I didn't factor all this in when I prepared my slides. but I think this is I see a lot of familiar names and names in the audience, people from Asia, which again adds to my stress because that means that people can challenge my interpretation of Asia. But I think that's a good thing. One of the key takeaways, and I'm jumping right to the last slide that I prepared in a way, is that Asia is just it's not just an elephant. It's a herd of elephants and sheep and whales and everything all thrown together. It's impossible for one person to describe. So to the audience, please push back, add your views, throw in your questions. The only way that this is going to be an exciting hour for everyone is if there's an engaged audience, right? So with that said, like I promised, I have prepared a presentation which my own suspicions, if you just let me drone on, which I hope you don't, probably will take not more than half an hour. And then we will definitely have more than enough time for everyone to push back with whatever you have. So this cover picture of my slide presentation is actually the outside of Sage Mediation's new office. And I like this picture that the photographer helped me to take because I thought it was a very good juxtaposition of history and modernity, which is very much Singapore, which is very much Asia. So much history. And for Singapore, 1896 is long history, right? I think the fact is in many other parts of Asia, history drags back for the thousands of years. And at the same time, a lot of new developments. It is the largest continent in the world. I haven't had time to fully put in the statistics because I tried to ask my colleagues to search for UN numbers and what is the latest numbers in terms of countries. But in the end, I decided, no, I think it sends a message when we leave it blank. We are the largest continent in the world. And sometimes even when we try to define Asia, I had long discussions with my colleagues at whether Russia should be considered part of Asia, the Middle East, and for me, that's part of what Asia is. You know, it's so big that it's hard to define. If I take my statistics where I include Russia, the Middle East, and I don't know whether any of us is here from Australia, from the Oceania part, but I excluded that part from Asia, we're still looking at a population of about 3.4 billion, right? Considering we have China at 1.3 billion, India at 1.4 billion, and Japan and Indonesia are also some of the largest, most populous countries in the world. So we have 3.5 billion people living in just this continent. Total representation in the Singapore Convention signatories, this number has changed in just 1 week so far as the total number has increased in terms of signatories to 57 now. And when my team counted, we have about 42. Again, depending on how you define Asia, right? Inclusive approach, about 42 out of 56 signatories of the Singapore Convention on Mediation are from Asia. Among the ratifiers, about half. We have 9 out of 16, which are from Asia. Because it's so diverse, again, just so that I can focus my presentation as to what I have seen is happening in Asia, I have decided to divide it into just 5 areas. Again, not including Russia, into how I would like to describe Asia, not for any political reasons, just trying to go with what I think global consensus as to what makes up Asia is. And there is no consensus. One part of Asia that is exciting a lot of the world, not just America, is East Asia. And I put East Asia excluding China, because I think China deserves its own presentation. But just to give a sense of what I know is happening in this part of the world for mediation and for ADR. Let's start with Hong Kong, right? And again, I can only do snapshots of the various places. Of course, East Asia is not just Hong Kong, South Korea, and Japan. There's Taiwan there as well. But I think these three are some of the most vibrant in terms of ADR. Hong Kong has always had, because of its status with the UK previously, it's always had a fairly mature common law system before 1997. And in the thanks to the old system, ADR was actually allowed to thrive. The mark of Hong Kong, however, is dynamism and color. And partly because of the way things have transited, they never had a strong institutional system for mediation. What existed for arbitration with the Hong Kong International Arbitration Center, which is a popular arbitration center, never quite happened for mediation. And a lot of mediation is led by individual mediators who each practice and define mediation to their own style. Not a bad thing, so far as it's made mediation very, very competitive, and everyone tries very hard to improve and show that their method is qualitatively better according to their own benchmarks. The shortcoming of this dynamism is that it's become increasingly difficult to promote mediation in Hong Kong, because no one really knows what that means. What is mediation in Hong Kong? Because everyone has his or her own definition. But it's still a place where mediation thrives, because right now of its relationship with China, and there are a lot of disputes involving Chinese parties. Not because Chinese parties are more litigious than any other nation, but just by the sheer size of its economy and its middle class, they have disputes, they have activities, and Hong Kong being a jurisdiction that is stronger in English than many other parts of China, many of the disputes involving Chinese parties do tend to be mediated in Hong Kong more than in many other Chinese cities. What is happening in South Korea right now, apart from politics and everything else, for South Korea, they've managed to use a slightly more institutional approach, right? And I think a lot of mediation is being driven by its leading arbitration entity, which is the Korean Commercial Arbitration Board. What I have seen working with my Korean counterparts is that apart from the KCAB, the other strong entity promoting mediation tends to be the Korean courts. The downside of having it so closely related to both arbitration and mediation is that I personally don't think private mediation has quite taken off yet in South Korea. And maybe that's, I'm going to confess that I think that that's quite a harsh diagnosis. Maybe the more politically correct and prudent way of describing it is that the way that mediation is practiced in South Korea is still not as aligned as it can be with what I have seen in many other jurisdictions, right, in the global circuit. And one of this signs is the 7 days cooling off period. It's because there is still a very low confidence in the mediation process. That leads to a low confidence in the mediated outcome, so much so that the norm, the accepted default, is that even after parties have signed off on the mediated settlement agreement, they are given 7 days to roll back on the deal. Because I cannot find a good reason for it, apart from the fact that there's just not enough confidence in the quality of the infrastructure and the quality of the mediators there amongst the local legal practitioners, both the judiciary as well as the lawyers. I think things are changing. I think there's reason for optimism because there is investment from the KCAB, partly because, like many other Asian jurisdictions, I think South Korea is waking up to the reality that if you want to be strong as an ADR jurisdiction, international ADR jurisdiction, just being strong in arbitration alone is not going to be enough. But I think they are still trying to balance, whereas whether to focus more on arbitration or to integrate mediation into their development. Japan is a strange entity because they are known for their zenness and their harmony, right? And they have tried to promote mediation and the establishment of the Japan International Mediation Center for several years now. And yet they still struggled very hard to establish themselves as an international mediation center. I look at this as being caused by three main features of what Japan is. The first feature is because they like harmony so much and they view adversarial processes so poorly, for them, even to have a third party come in to help facilitate a settlement is too much a loss of face. And there is therefore that discomfort with mediation as a concept, because if I have to introduce a third party, both for the lawyers as well as the business leaders and the community leaders, or even the family leaders, that is quite an intolerable loss of face. That's one. The second one is that the second reason why progress in mediation development has been slow is that it has largely been the development of mediation has largely been pushed by the private sector. The public sector has the ministry as well as the courts have been a lot more reticent in promoting mediation. Why is this so? Again, I don't have very good reasons for it. One reality, one practical consideration is that at least for the last 10 years, political stability has not really been there. They've had quite a few change of governments. So the agenda has been distracted. But again, I think this is making an excuse for them, right? But because it's largely private-led, in terms of funding, in terms of focus, it's been harder. The third element that has held Japan back from really growing as an international mediation jurisdiction, as much as its talent can allow it to, is that there is still a certain nationalism. And I like to joke about this, and even with the JIMC committee, they laugh about it because it's the JIMC, right? It's the International Mediation Center, but on its team of advisors of, I think, nearly 20 people at the onset, there were only 2 non-Japanese, and we had to fight for 6 meetings to persuade the rest of the committee to accept that if they were to be an international mediation center, then the website cannot only be in Japanese. There must be at least a translation tool or an English version of the website for the JIMC to be acceptable as an international mediation center. But these are the kind of resistance which I feel is making the growth not as fast, despite having a very, very strong culture towards harmony that should lend it to incline towards mediation. Then China. China is very often, as many of us hear about it and know about it from personal experience, in its own league when it comes to developing. And mediation is no different. I have been working closely with Chinese mediators for, I think, 2013, probably even before that, so probably close to 15 years. And it's amazing seeing how far they have come in the 15 years. I think back in about 2011 and 2010, like many places, mediators were quite I think it's not overstating it to say that they were a despised and disrespected profession. Like many new professions, they were looked at as, witch doctors, just naive do-gooders at best. When in recent days, when I went back to visit China, just in Hangzhou itself, and Hangzhou is considered a new tier 1 city relative to places like Beijing, Shenzhen, and Shanghai. But just in Hangzhou itself, I was brought to visit 3 large mediation centers, and I was told that there's about 15 of them. And when I say large, I mean that they have facilities at the top of some of these skyscrapers. Though to be clear, this is the landscape from Shanghai, not Hangzhou. But their mediation centers are modern. They are taking in about 15,000 cases, mediation cases, a year each, right? And it's their mediators are getting reasonable salaries for the nature of the market. The development is not surprising. Back in 2017, there was already the sense that the Chinese government wanted to move to use mediation in a big way. And part of the thinking from that time was that they needed an alternative to arbitration. For what they could well foresee were the disputes that were going to come from all the investments going from Chinese parties to overseas markets because of the very aggressive Belt Road Initiative. I think they could already see in 2017, and to be clear, Belt Road Initiative started from about 2009. So by 2017, a lot of disputes were already starting. And then the pandemic broke out, And if we thought that there were disputes between 2007 and 2017, the pandemic really really accelerated a lot of the failing projects or the struggling projects. What even I wasn't aware was that in the time that many countries were closed off because of the pandemic, and a lot of people didn't know what was happening, China was actually quite actively developing its mediation centers and mediators. So from my last visit to Beijing on December 2019 to my next visit in June 2023, the change was very stark. The competence that I saw in the mediators, the kind of technology invested in its mediation centers to allow online mediations to which were helpful not just for the domestic cases, but have really enabled international mediations to take place at very low cost. The leapfrogging, right? I think again, when I was there in 2019, there was still much greater respect for arbitrators than there was for mediators. But now what I went to discover is that the respect for mediators has grown a lot, so much so that many legal practitioners are now saying, yeah, let's be trained as mediators first before we become trained as arbitrators. Or a lot of the new training programs basically integrate mediation training into arbitration training so that they can be concurrently accredited as both. What this means for many of us is that I completely will not be surprised, and no one should be, that China is going to take a huge lead role in pushing out maybe not so much a novel model, but certainly novel by its efficiency of an integrated ARPMET process. Something that very much leapfrogs ARPMET as we now know it, right? Where people file for arbitration, stay the process, and then go for mediation. I already see them trying to study the process of arbitration and mediation, the best practices, the competency standards, the ethical standards, and trying to find a way where there is a somewhat novel integrated dispute resolution process that increases efficiency and sustains rule of law by their definition, and that will be pushed out to many countries which had received aid under the Belt Road Initiative. Part of why this might grow in popularity and quality is that China mediation uses quite unashamedly what we in Singapore call the contingency fee model, meaning the mediators are paid only if there's a settlement, right? I mean, in Singapore and in many parts of the world, mediators are paid for running the process. If there is no settlement, one of the reasons why we don't work on contingency fee model is because mediators don't have the power to force a settlement. But that's what distinguishes us from arbitrators. The difference in China is that they decided to do away with this. Mediators are only paid if there is a settlement. Downside is that, yes, it does give rise to certain questionable practices from an ethics perspective. Are there mediators forcing a settlement? Yes. But the upside is that it is also driving an improvement in mediator competence because it's a small, I mean, even for China, it's a small market, people talk, relationships are important. If you're unethical, you will be called out, especially in the information age. And if you practice well and you are effective, and you help parties achieve satisfactory outcomes in a satisfactory process, you can grow in popularity very, very fast. And the contingency fee model is actually driving that kind of hunger for self-improvement, that kind of passion for self-improvement, which I don't see in many jurisdictions. So China, for mediation, for ADR, doing a lot of things quietly, definitely going to be a game changer thanks to their sheer economic clout, thanks to the attention that the political leadership is giving to mediation. We shift focus to South Asia from East Asia. The SAARC area, right? Of course, it's not just made up of India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. There's Bhutan, there's Nepal, and all as well. But I think these four, one, they are the areas that I have been more active in, that Sage Mediation has been more active in. Two, I think they are also the more influential jurisdictions within this region. Speak to many of the judges, the mediators, the arbitrators, the legal practitioners, and like many countries, they would claim ownership of mediation, right? And again, like I said, it's not just South Asia. When I speak to my friends in the Scandinavian countries, they will tell you also that peacemaking by village elders started from them. A lot of jurisdictions claim to be the proud owners of the origins of mediation. I've given up trying to define who really started it. But for South Asia, the Panchayat model is something which they are very, very proud of. And there is a push to recollect that history and bring it back to life today. Part of it is because they are trying to draw more and more foreign investments and activity. Relative to East Asia, South Asia has not been receiving as much foreign investments for the last 50 years. And they are making a very strong effort to recalibrate this balance, to draw back some of the foreign investments to their countries. They do recognize that one of the big problems has been what they call pendency in courts. It is unfortunately notorious that if you start a suit in court, you might have to wait 3 generations before you get an outcome. There's very long delay. And so much so that I was quite stunned, because I live in Singapore, where 2 years for an outcome is already too long. Judges will be penalized for that. But because of how accepted it is that hearing a case will take between 10 years to 15 years, it's become one of the legal domains for practice on how to delay a court case. Completely new to me. I was quite surprised that can exist as a business model. But it's not. That's the norm there. But it is not a norm that they are very proud of. And that delay is leading to a very strong interest to strengthen its ADR infrastructure, ADR competency, because businesses can't work with this kind of court systems, right? The difficulty, of course, is that as much as there is a very big part of the population that wants justice, not just substantive but administrative justice, right? Access. There is a very strong lobby that resists change, right? Because again, they have built up their business models around the current system, and they are very powerful in the political circle, in the commercial circles. positives for this market, regardless of all this history and baggage and political and commercial resistance to mediation, is that I have found some of the most brilliant, sharpest, creative, and empathetic mediators that I've ever met in South Asia. It's amazing. It's an amazing joy, amazing blessing to co-mediate with some of them and watch them at work. They see possibilities and pathways which I take a long time before I spot this is a possible approach. Very good people. Difficulty is that, again, huge populations, and because the development is so unequal in different cities, it's actually been very difficult for them to put together a very coherent narrative of what is best practice. Because it's difficult to decide whether you want to set the bar as high as it can be, since the talent is so great, and then you kind of deny access into the mediation practice for a large part of the population. And yet, on the other hand, because the senior mediators recognize what is good and what should be done, for them as well to accept what they view as a dilution of standards is something which they resist as well. So unequal development and understanding, very, very different pools as to how best to use mediation to help that economic drive of the different countries. It's a struggle that I can't see an early resolution to. The only optimism I have is they are aware of it. They are trying very hard to find a solution. But these places are as democratic as they can be, for better or for worse. Another exciting region, before I come closer to home, in Southeast Asia, is the Middle East. The Middle East has been extremely aggressive, not just in sports and buying over soccer clubs and American football teams, but definitely in the ADR scene. There is now a very exciting rivalry between Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and Qatar to be the keynote for dispute resolution for ADR for companies in Europe, Africa, and Asia. They look at themselves as situated right in the middle of these three regions, and they've drawn a lot of practitioners to be based there. Many of the King's Council that operate out of Singapore also have an office in Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Because they look at Singapore as a place for conducting arbitrations and mediations for Asian and European countries, and the Middle East as very much for European and African countries. But definitely the Middle East is not looking at just being a node for European and Middle East disputes. They have international ambitions. They have put in they have the resource, and they put in very large investments in physical and technological infrastructure. One of my memorable moments was in 2018. So this was, again, pre-COVID. And I remember I was there for a presentation by the DIFC, by the Dubai International Financial Center, right? And it was very humbling, because I had to watch a presentation by a Singapore company on what we did in terms of legal tech. And in classic Singapore fashion, which I'm trying very hard to avoid with these slides, but not successfully, the legal tech, the website of that platform was so wordy, and low in images, and there were so many links that you had to click to decide whether you were going to file a case for court, which stage of the legal process you are in, whether you're a client or a lawyer or a judge, and you have to log in differently. It was confusing to watch. And after the Singapore presentation was done, the Dubai courts did a presentation, and you could see that they engaged professionals to assist them. The website was clean. It was idiot friendly, meaning I understood what they were trying to say, and they showed that in the time that it took for parties to finish a mediation and print out the settlement and walk with that printed settlement to the registry, by the time they reached the front desk at the registry, that settlement agreement would have been converted to a court order, and they would receive a copy of the settlement agreement and the court order. And for a pre-COVID development, they had simultaneous translations possible, whether you were doing online or in person. The subtitles, if you speak into the device, the subtitles will appear in the corresponding language of the other party, and the accuracy was about a 99% accuracy. I was mind blown, right, by what I saw. So that was in 2018. They have done a lot more. The tricky part for the Middle East, for all its infrastructure developments, is that, yeah, in the end, the culture that they operate in is very much honor-based. So we do need, they do expect whatever international systems that go in there and whatever international practices go in there to be somewhat honor-based, meaning you do need to demonstrate a very clear effort to integrate the local culture, the local tradition into your system. That might take some getting used to, but again, they have tried to narrow the gap, the cultural gap, very much. Central Asia, relatively poorer, and yet I will be going to Tashkent at the end of May. They have been putting in a lot of efforts to position themselves as the melting pot of Western and Russian legal systems. And like it or not, we have to admit, Russia is a major economic power, right? So there will be commercial disputes. And this is where Central Asia has been positioning themselves to be a hub. A lot of state-led investments, and because of their central location between Europe and Russia, there is actually a very large competition in terms of foreign funding to the government to help build ADR capacity. A lot of this capacity building is being done by the universities and the courts and the lawyer associations. What I'm seeing is that for them, it's a much more integrated effort at developing ADR compared to, say, Hong Kong. So again, exciting because it's probably the most cohesive effort, public-private effort that I've seen in any part of the world to develop themselves as a mediation center, as an ADR center. Downside is that, yes, still very strong language barriers, but again, the hunger and the speed of learning and the speed of investments that's going in there, I would say definitely one of the hottest and fastest growing Asian regions. Okay, I realize that I've definitely hit the half-hour mark for my presentation, and I do want some time for discussions. Let me just talk very quickly about home and outside Singapore first. Southeast Asia. A big part of why Singapore decided that being an ADR hub is a good economic strategy for Singapore's own growth is that when the Singapore government did a study with the Asian Development Bank, the projection back in 2011 was that Southeast Asia will receive about $1 trillion per year in foreign infrastructure investment from 2011 to 2030. And it's 1 trillion per year. It is still, I think, the fastest growing middle income sector in the world, if you just take per capita development. And generally, people still like to go to the courts for dispute resolution, regardless of quite some awareness that there is corruption, right? And I'll just say it. The speed of economic growth has really not been matched by the speed of ADR growth. It's not that they don't know ADR. Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Manila, even say Hanoi and Bangkok, ADR is big, right? Some of they have prominent arbitration centers. Mediation, still not as well known. There is a lot of fear that mediators have not been properly trained, and that corruption will still prevail because of the requirement for confidentiality and the lack of proper safeguards in terms of governance frameworks for mediation, right? So you get lawyers and corporates still fairly skeptical about what is mediation and would it truly lead to a sustainable outcome. That said, they are watching Singapore, which has been promoting mediation and seems to have done fairly well in using mediation as a trusted process to support our own economic growth. Singapore's mediation is, partly because of history and partly because of our size, largely institutional. Many of our mediations still go to the Singapore Mediation Centre as well as the Singapore International Mediation Centre. Private entities like Sage Mediation, what I founded is the rarity. The good part is that I think the government has really tried to make a lot of our skills and infrastructure development not just dependent on their efforts. So very much in recent times, meaning from about 2013 onwards, there was a very strong push to get lawyers and mediators and academics taking ownership of mediation growth. On the public side, the support was given from the courts and from the ministry by having a mediation act, so that we address all the myths being perpetrated by our haters, that mediated settlement agreements were not binding. Thanks to the Mediation Act, it's now very clear mediated settlement agreements are as enforceable as anything, right? As arbitration awards if so necessary. Downside of Singapore, of course, is that we are a very small market and very expensive. So as much as we have liked to put ourselves, brand ourselves as a laboratory for top mediators to come in and experiment and try, because the market is so small, oftentimes it is difficult to draw top practitioners to be based here. That said, we have put in a lot of effort to increase connectivity between Singapore and the larger part of Asia. So yes, international mediators have been drawn here, and And it's been fun. It's been fun for me as a private practitioner to see how much improvement there is in the quality of the mediated outcomes in Singapore that we have experienced for the last 5 years, right? And I've been doing this for about 25 years in Singapore. A lot of the qualitative improvements have come about only recently. Well, the question then, and I know there's a good number of the audience who are not from Asia, are we really moving from the Bronze Age to the Golden Age? I borrowed the title of this presentation from our Chief Justice because he went to India 2 years back and he told the Indian audience, we are at a golden age for mediation. I like to be as optimistic as he is, but because I have to do the work to make sure it's the golden age, I find my optimism very tempered. There are challenges. As you can see, balancing the growth that many people want to see in mediation work and controlling, ensuring that this growth is matched by the quality of mediation practice has been tough. I read one recent article and they shared that in India, we have about 475 to 500 mediation centers that were set up in India. Number one, I think this is only the detectable number. My own gut sense is that it's at least double that number. But number two, and what confirms my own suspicion, is that of even just 500, about 70% were set up in the last 3 years. And many of these entities are by self-declared and self-trained mediators. Two, partly because of the questionable average quality, it's made it very easy for those who are wanting to keep dispute resolution in the adversarial processes to cast doubt on the effectiveness of mediation. And for corporate users, our key clients, there is still very low awareness of what mediation is. Many of them still think of mediation as something you use for community disputes, rather than as a process for resolving complex, sophisticated, technologically sophisticated matters. Right, so the awareness still very low, the trust still very low. Nonetheless, for all these difficulties which anyone who wants to come here needs to be mindful of, if I try to be optimistic, this is a region with really a very young, enthusiastic, and talented group. If you look at many of the mediation competitions which are being conducted, I would say more than half of them are being won by teams from Asia. Right, and again, then very proudly say the recent ICC mediation competition was won by a Singapore team. But with humility, I'll say that was the first time anyone from Singapore has won it. So for all the development, it took us a while. A lot of government interest in promoting mediation, providing funding, setting up pet-friendlier legislation, making it easier for mediators to come here and do business. So again, given what has just happened in terms of tariffs, Singapore allows foreign mediators and lawyers coming to have a mediation in Singapore to have whatever they earn here be free from tax, right? So I don't think we're the only ones who are moving to put in regulation that is friendly. And of course, with this growth in work, there's a lot of growth in education. Now people are doing diverse topics. I just did a mediation advocacy course this afternoon, conducted one, and I conducted it online, right? So it's both. And there's a lot of fascinating themes being discovered. should you come to Asia now, let me just tell you a little bit about Sage's story. We were started in 2019 for all the brilliant planning that I had. If I could, I might have maybe started it in 2022 post-pandemic, but all good. The pandemic forced us to pivot. We were able to consult for a lot of Asian governments to set up mediation centers, partly because it was just online access and it was cheap. I didn't need to fly there to do a lot of this consultation. And we grew both in a training and in consultation. We started developing mediation frameworks for some of our public agencies in Singapore as well as overseas. And about 5 years after, it was very much an Aloysius Goh show. We have grown to be a 100-strong international mediator panel. And earlier this year, we were able to invest in our own mediation space, where we have our own mediation facilities. Started doing a lot of different mediation services, started doing a lot more in training. And again, like I think many of us here are ADR practitioners. When you can have your own center and space to conduct what we do, it's really like a chef having your own restaurant, because the space speaks so much of what we do, rather than being dependent on an external provider. We started doing all kinds of disputes thanks to the panel, and we've been able to roll out our own unique mediation process, right? Something that compels our mediators to think hard about leveraging on the flexibility of the mediation process. So our mediators don't just use one method for every dispute. We do a lot of preparation, and so that we build the field, we encourage co-mediation so that mediators are not possessive of work, and mediation as a practice can grow. And of course, for us, for mediation to grow in credibility, having the cases managed well and turned over quickly is key. We worked hard to build our credibility, gotten ourselves recognized by some international bodies, including the IMI, the SIMI, and the Swiss Chamber. And what does all this mean then? I'm going to fast forward to the end. My own takeaway if this is to be a golden age, we need to put in our own efforts. To succeed in Asia, both for Asians and non-Asians, there's a lot to unlearn and relearn. What conflict means and what it means to resolve conflict is heavily dependent on context. People pay a lot of attention to where you have your mediation here, to how a mediator is appointed, and to whether you are prepared to listen to them when you design your mediation process rather than impose your own method. You need to have a very clear value proposition. And this means that you cannot just come and flex your certificates or count on your relationships, count on your guanxi, right? People do ask, clients do ask, why do I need a mediator? Why can't I negotiate? What is the value that we bring? And we need to be able to articulate those values and articulate it in a way which doesn't put down the local values. We cannot come in and say, yeah, engage me because I know how to do this better than you. The final thing is that it's not going to happen overnight anywhere in Asia. Because it's a green shoots industry, the first 3 years when we try to come in, no matter how talented we are, feels like we're running backwards. It takes time to build trust. And if we are going to try to be here and let the golden age prove true for ourselves, then financial planning is key, because the first 3 years are a hard slog. But get past that time, and I think generally, if we do our service well and our business development well, the golden age will be what we experience. But again, we're not fully there yet. whether it's truly golden age will be up to all of you here to tell me when you put in the effort.
That's great, Aloysius. Thank you so much. Such a comprehensive presentation. Things that are a lot of news, I'm sure, for a whole lot of people on this webinar, including myself. Our time is up. I want to thank you on behalf of Jean and Natalie and everybody who's watching live and who will be watching the recording. We encourage people to contribute to the Food Bank Singapore. Natalie has been kind enough to post the link in the chat section here. I know we'll raise a lot of money to fight food insecurity in Singapore, and that's what it's really all about. Aloysius Goh, thank you for an excellent presentation. And with that, we are complete.